I didn't plan to go back to work because of a sheet of printer paper on a telephone pole, but that's how it happened. White copy paper rippling in the breeze, black Arial font, the tabs along the bottom cut with scissors. Night guard needed $25/HR, no patrol required. Call 905 555-0198. It was taped outside the grocery store between a lost cat flyer and a piano teacher's business card. Somebody had already torn off half the little phone number slips. The rest fluttered like fish gills when trucks blew by. I stood there with a gallon of milk sweating against my leg and thought, no patrol required. Those words lodged into my brain the way a song hook does. Security without walking around. Security without catching kids spray painting dumpsters at 2 a.m. Security where you sit. I tore off a tab, 2 actually, one for the console in the minivan so I wouldn't lose it, and one for my wallet because I would absolutely lose the one in the minivan. On the way home, my youngest, Addie, chattered about a papier-mâché volcano she'd made. She had dried glue on her cheek like a translucent scab. I listened and laughed and did the dad thing at red lights. No, we cannot go back right now to show the cashier your volcano picture. And behind all of that, like a second radio station bleeding into the signal, I kept hearing no patrol required. I was a stay-at-home dad by choice, and I'll be honest, by luck. My wife, Jordan, makes more than I ever did. She's a foreman now on a carpentry crew. She comes home smelling like sawdust and cold air, drops a tape measure on the kitchen table, and eats standing up because the legs go to jelly when she sits. She outturned me even when I tried, and I did try. I have a bachelor's degree that devoured 4 years and a lot of ramen, and it should have funneled me straight into a teacher's college. That was the plan. But plans can be little paper boats you put on a river. The river never asked where you wanted to go. I got the rejection letters in a fat week. We regret to inform you. I remember laying them side by side and thinking if I stared long enough, one would morph into congratulations. I took temp jobs while Jordan found steady work framing and later managing crews. She was 24 with a union card and a truck that actually started when she turned the key. I was 24 with a stack of binders and a resume that read like a wish list. Being home with the kids fit me in a way nothing else had. I could do laundry with a baby in a baby Bjorn. I could make dinosaur-shaped pancakes. I could diffuse nuclear meltdowns with fruit snacks and PBS. Sometimes when I caught sight of myself in the microwave door, hair a mess, coffee sloshing, a toddler clamped to my calf, I'd think I'm good at this. I'm useful. But time changes shape. The oldest, Nora, got too cool for park swings. Theo started insisting on buckling himself. Addie stopped needing help zipping. The house got quieter between 8 and 3. I took to cleaning our already clean kitchen and stacking little rocks of worry in my chest. Was I still useful if nobody needed me for 6 hours? Was I selfish to want the answer to be yes? Jordan never pushed, not exactly. She would say it in the gentlest voice over a tangle of chargers at night. You could pick up something if you wanted. Doesn't have to be big. Just something for you, Ethan. At home that evening, I set the milk in the fridge, the phone tab on the counter, plated up a hastily assembled dinner, and watched Addie reenact the Pompeii disaster with a packet of red glitter. When the house quieted and everybody found their corners, I went back to the counter. 905, 555-0198. I dialed on speaker while rinsing pasta out of a pot. The ring had a weird skip. Like the line couldn't decide whether to connect or cough me back out. On the fourth ring a voice picked up no hello. Can you start tonight? I turned the burner off out of reflex. Tonight. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 4 nights, Monday through Thursday, no patrol. The voice was quick, almost rehearsed. Rustle of paper maybe, or maybe wind. Just eyes on the site, call if you see something. What's the site? I asked. Baird and Holly's redevelopment. He rolled the words together. Old foundry down by Ridgewater. They tore half of it and left it. We need a body in the booth. I pictured a booth like the kind at parking garages, a cube with windows and a stool where you can see your breath when you exhale. Is this through a company? A pause. Yeah, Site Solutions. I tried to place the name. It washed over me like a news anchor pronouncing a politician you think you've heard of but actually haven't. License. You need a security license. We need a body in the booth, he repeated, less patient this time. No patrol, no contact. Cameras do the walking. Can you start tonight or not? I looked around our kitchen like the answer might be under a dish towel. 6 a.m. Put me home in time to drive Addie to school. I could sleep when the house quieted again. It slotted into the jigsaw of our lives in a way that felt faded. Where exactly? I said. Ridgewater is a long stretch. Westfield Road past the water towers. He cleared his throat. Look for the billboard that says live here, River Lofts, gravel road to the right. If you pass the billboard, you've gone too far. That billboard had loomed in my periphery for years. Shiny render of a smiling couple on a balcony with a city skyline that wasn't our city. I knew it so well I didn't see it anymore. You'll meet the outgoing guard at 9:30, the voice said. He'll hand you the uniform. Uniform. I wiped my wet hands on my jeans. This is all above board. Nothing's above board, he said like a joke that wasn't supposed to be funny. I'll text you the gate code. You can read numbers, can't you? I let the jab slide. Yeah, I said, I can start tonight. When I hung up, Jordan was leaning in the archway, ankles crossed, watching me with that quiet half-smile she reserves for cats stuck in blinds and her husband deciding to be brave. Security again. Booth only, I said. No patrol. Your favorite kind, she said. You'll bring a book and drink 6 cups of coffee and build a whole personality with the guy at the midnight radio show. I'm a father of 3, I said. My personality is half Target receipts. She came over and kissed my cheek. You okay? I nodded. Feels good to try, even if it's stupid. It's not stupid, she said. You know what you're doing. People forget security is invisible until it isn't. Addie ran in then to demonstrate her volcano one more time before bed, and the moment closed over like water. At 8:30, when the kids were asleep and the dishwasher clicked into its low hum, I poured coffee into a thermos and layered on clothes in that ritualistic way that makes you believe for 8 seconds that preparedness can outrun bad luck. Book, charger, snack bars, an extra hoodie, my old work boots from when I spent 6 months installing flooring with a buddy, heavy, reassuring like a promise. Jordan followed me to the door with a sweatshirt draped over her shoulder. You don't have to do this, she said, which is the same as saying I'll love you if you don't. But if you do, text me when you get there. My phone is at 7%, I admitted, lifting the charger cord. She rolled her eyes, fond, and handed me a portable battery the size of a deck of cards. There is a very specific kind of love in knowing where your person will fall apart and handing them duct tape before they do. Be careful, Ethan. Booth only, I said, as if those words were a Kevlar vest. You know those parts of town that look like somebody held down a delete key? That's Ridgewater after dark. The last light bleeds out behind you, and then it's just sodium street lamps flicking at corners, a couple of weed-choked lots, chain-link fences that have lost arguments with trucks. The road to the old foundry runs alongside the river. Even with the van closed tight, I could smell it, a metallic damp, cold and silt, and a memory of something scorched. I passed a boarded-up bakery. The sign still promised peach turnovers on Saturdays. I passed a rectangle of new townhomes trying to pretend they belonged here. And then the billboard appeared in my headlights, exactly where the voice had said, "Live here, River Lofts," a photo of a couple who looked like they jogged for leisure and remembered to stretch. The corner of the sign had peeled back, and the man's smile warped into an ellipse. There, to the right of the sign, a gravel lane cut into brush where no road had business being. I might have missed it in daylight. At night it looked like a mouth. I turned in, tires crunching. The lane bent behind a stack of broken concrete the size of elephants and then opened up on what had once been a parking lot. Halogen lights stapled to temporary poles washed everything in a colorless glare. Exposed rebar, piles of brick rubble, a coil of orange fencing that had slumped like a sleeping snake. Half a building still stood, the way a tooth sometimes does in a jaw after a fight. The rest had been scooped away, ground leveled and tamped. A couple of barrels huddled by a cinder block wall like off-duty soldiers. The booth sat off to one side on skids, a prefab rectangle with a door and a small square of glass. Not a garage booth, more like a portable classroom's littler, meaner cousin. A Pontiac I hadn't seen on a road in a decade idled beside it, exhaust steaming in the cold. I pulled in a few spaces back so my headlights didn't turn the booth into a stage. For a minute I just sat there with my hands on the wheel and listened to my heart go. It's a sound I know well, a quick ceiling fan thwack in the ears. Stage fright's second cousin. The thought came, if you back out now, Jordan will understand. Then the other one, and you will hate yourself in the morning. Before I could decide which voice to obey, the booth door opened and a man stepped out onto the little concrete stoop. He was older in the way men get older when they boil themselves in coffee and night shifts, skin sallow under the light, hair thinned to a white fuzz, coat buttoned wrong. He moved like his shoes pinched. I killed the engine and climbed out into air that bit. "Evening," I said, lifting one hand. He studied me as if I were a receipt he needed to keep for taxes. "You Ethan?" "Yeah." He nodded like this satisfied some bleak prophecy. "You're late. It's 9:30 on the dot." I glanced at my phone, 9:31. "Late," he repeated, but without heat. His voice had the rasp of cheap filters and long winters. He turned and held the door. "Come on. Don't stand there giving the open-air ideas." The booth's heat hit me like the inside of a dryer. The room was narrower than it looked outside, a single plank table against one wall with a nest of cables and a stack of monitors. Most of the screens were dark. A landline phone sat on an old phone book to make it feel important. A battered office chair had been set so that whoever sat would face the door and the monitors, eyes ping-ponging between both. There was a small fridge, a coffee pot, and a bathroom door with a metal hasp that didn't match the lock. The man slid the bolt into the door, not just the knob lock, but a heavy bar you'd see in a basement door in tornado country. "You got ID?" I showed him my license. He didn't touch it, just squinted like the information would bail water directly into his brain that way. Ethan James. He said it like he was trying to figure out if he knew me from someplace where people regret things. You got a book. I patted my backpack. Always. That's good, he said, expression flicking toward almost kind. Nothing happens until it does. He reached into a locker and produced a dark jacket with sight solutions stitched above the pocket. He shook it once as if to wake it and then handed it over. It was heavier than it looked, or maybe the weight wasn't cloth. Is there, I motioned to the stack of blank monitors, a trick to these? No trick. He tapped above one of the screens where a power strip flashed a steady red dot. They come on when they want. I was told they do the walking. That's what they told me too, he said. You're relieved at 6. He checked a watch with a crack right through the face. You'll call the number on the phone if you see anything you can describe and spell. I laughed, a short, hopeful bark. He didn't. What's your name? I asked. He considered this question for longer than the question deserved. Everybody calls me Red. The jacket he'd given me said RED on the stitched tag. I must have looked because he said it was Fred. Once, now it's Red. Things fade. He waved me toward the chair. I sat. The cushion had learned someone else's shape and tried to make me fit it. There's a particular quiet to job sites at night. It's not true silence. It's a big room the sound moved out of in a hurry. Through the little square of glass by the door, haloed by dust on the inside of the pane, the world looked like a still photo stuck under a fluorescent light. I could see the pole with the halogen light, the rebar, the Pontiac I assumed belonged to Red. He stood by the door like he was measuring whether the night would come in if he turned his back on it. Then he turned to me, the jacket now on my lap, and said the sort of thing you repeat because you need to hear how it will sound when it's true. You ever done this before, Ethan? Security. Yeah. Mall work years ago. How'd you like it? I liked the parts where I got paid to read, I said. Didn't love the parts with drunk teenagers trying to fight a sunglasses kiosk. A flick of a smile then, quick and private. You read in here if you like, you drink your coffee, you sit on your hands, you call if something looks like it's going to become a problem. If kids hop the fence, you don't go out and tell them your life story. You let the site solve it. He tapped the patch on the jacket, Site Solutions. That's the solution, someone else. I nodded. No patrol, no patrol. He said it like a sacrament, and I felt my shoulders release an inch. You don't set foot off this slab from 10 to 6. You don't chase. You don't play hero. You don't interact. He took a breath like he was about to add unless, and then he closed whatever door inside you close when you decide not to be the person who explains things anymore. He looked older in that moment, not from years but from miles. You going to give me a rundown? Hazards, things to watch for. He drummed fingers on the table once, twice, then flattened his palm. You watch the road. You watch the cut in the fence by the south barrel. You watch the old tunnel mouth by the retaining wall. He pointed on an unlit monitor, then looked at the dark screen and seemed to remember it was off. You watch the door. The door. He nodded at the door we just bolted. The night beyond it pressed against the little square window the way an ocean does. People come by, I asked. People always come by, he said, especially when we start getting closer to winter. A warm box in a cold world reads like a prayer. I knew what he meant. You could feel the heat on your face and forget who the face belonged to. Red straightened his coat. His eyes had that unfocused thing old men get when the thing they want to look at exists 30 years ago. Listen to me now, Ethan. I did. The room did. Even the humming light seemed to bend its noise around his words. Don't leave the booth, he said, even if they beg. The booth shut around me like the lid of a box someone had already nailed shut. From the outside, it looked like a squat prefab office, the kind you see at construction sites. Metal siding, single door, one tiny square of glass. But once the door clanged shut and the bolt slid home, it didn't feel like an office at all. Offices have windows. Offices let light in. This thing was a coffin with fluorescent tubes bolted overhead. 4 walls. A cot shoved against one. A recliner opposite. A little fridge that hummed only when it felt like it. A bathroom door with a hasp that made me wonder who they were trying to keep in. And on the far wall, a plank table sagging under a nest of cables and half-dead monitors stacked like bricks. It smelled like old dust and burnt wiring. The kind of smell you only notice in the houses of relatives who never throw anything away. I tried the chair. The cushion sighed, trying to mold me into the shape of whoever had been here before. My backpack would have fit perfectly at my feet with my book and thermos and snacks. Except my backpack was still in the passenger seat of my van. Rule 1, Red had said, never leave the booth, even if they beg. At the time it sounded like a grumpy old man's way of saying don't get into trouble. Sitting there, jacket heavy on my shoulders, the words didn't feel like advice. They felt like a lock clicking shut. I took stock. The walkie-talkie on the table dead. I shook it, thumbed the dial, even banged it gently against the desk. Nothing. 2 flashlights sat in the locker, both rattling like baby toys when I twisted the caps. Dead batteries, of course. And the monitor's dark glass staring back at me like blind eyes. A red light blinked on the power strip, taunting. I pressed the buttons anyway, they stayed dead. Hell of a setup, I muttered. My voice didn't carry. The walls swallowed it. The landline sat crooked on the table, perched on a phone book from 10 years ago. I picked it up, heard a faint dial tone, and put it back. The only working piece of equipment in the place was the one most people under 30 would call ancient history. I stood, paced 3 steps to the door, 3 steps back. The floor flexed like a dock. My eyes kept snagging on the square window in the door. Nothing but night out there, with the pole light casting a pale slice across gravel. Beyond that, blackness pressed like a held breath. I thought about my bag in the car. Thermos, charger, paperbacks. The kind of things that make 8 hours possible. The kind of things that anchor you when you're sitting in a shoebox full of silence. It would take less than a minute. Out the door, across the lot, click open the van, grab the bag, back inside. I could even leave the door propped open with the chair so I wasn't fumbling with keys. The thought carried me right to the door. My hand hovered on the bolt. That's when I noticed it, the quiet, not the ordinary kind. Not late-night suburb quiet with a dog barking 3 streets over. This was no sound at all. No crickets, though it was summer. No leaves hissing in the wind. Even my boots on the floor felt muffled, like the air was cotton. I pressed my ear to the door, thinking maybe the insulation was too good. Nothing. Something about silence that deep makes your own body louder. My breathing sounded like a storm. My pulse thumped so hard it echoed in my jaw. I stepped back, suddenly sure that if I opened the door, the silence would swallow me too. I went to the monitors again, tapped one with a knuckle. The black screen reflected me back, face stretched, eyes too wide. The van was right outside. I could almost see it in my head. The gray upholstery, my backpack strap looped over the headrest. The things that made this whole job doable. I set my jaw, slid the bolt back an inch. Then, light flared. My van's headlights flicked on by themselves, flooding the lot in pale beams. They stuttered, flickered like a dying bulb, then steadied. For a second the booth door window filled with white glare. In that split second of light I saw it. Something stood on the stoop. Arms, legs, body roughly human, but the head, no face, smooth where the eyes should be, blank skin where a mouth belonged. The light cut, darkness crashed back in. I staggered from the door, heart jamming against my ribs. My hand found the bolt and slammed it shut. Silence again, thick, waiting, and the square of glass in the door was just black. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen in that flash of headlights. A figure standing inches away, staring with nothing at all. The first knock came soft, polite almost. I'd been sitting with my fists pressed to my knees, staring at the dead monitors, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I thought I'd seen in the headlights. My mind wanted to rewrite it. It was a shadow, it was a tree, it was nothing. Then knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. I froze. The sound was ordinary wood-on skin, but in that suffocating silence it cracked through like a gunshot. Another knock, steady. Then a voice. "Hey man, open up, it's freezing out here." Not the faceless thing, a normal voice. Male, mid-20s maybe. I stood, legs shaky, and peered through the little square of glass. A man stood on the stoop. Young, scruffy beard, hoodie under a high-vis vest. Hands shoved into his pockets like he'd been waiting out there too long. He shifted from foot to foot and knocked again. "Come on, dude, let me in. I'm your relief." Relief. At midnight. Red had said nothing about a shift change. I swallowed, throat dry. "Who are you?" He grinned, lazy, half-lidded eyes. "Brett, they sent me down. I'm supposed to cover." He leaned closer to the window. "What, you want me to freeze to death? Open the damn door." Something in me rebelled. Red's words echoed, "Don't leave the booth, even if they beg," but this guy wasn't begging. He was annoyed, bored, like he'd been through this routine before. I backed up, scanning the table. The monitors still stared black. I reached for the power strip, thumbed the toggle, and for the first time that night one of the screens hummed alive. Static. Then a dim grayscale image resolved, the stoop outside. My heart lurched, because on the monitor there was also a man standing there. Same beard, same hoodie, same vest, but this version wasn't moving. His eyes were wide, not lazy. His mouth worked silently, forming words I couldn't hear. Then he shook his head. Slow, deliberate, no. I darted a look to the door window. The man outside smiled, impatient, and tapped the glass with a knuckle. "You gonna let me in, buddy? It's cold as hell." I looked back at the monitor. The other version, Brett #2, kept shaking his head, hands lifted in frantic warning. "What the hell?" I whispered. Two of them, one bored, one terrified, which was real. I pressed closer to the screen, searching for differences. On the monitor, the terrified Brett's eyes darted side to side, scanning the shadows. His chest heaved like he'd sprinted here. Live Brett at the door, though, his eyelids drooped. He yawned, actually yawned, before wrapping the door again. "Open up, man," he said, voice flatter now. "Don't make me stand here." I flicked my gaze between them, one outside the door I could hear, one on the monitor I could only see, and then the bored one leaned closer to the glass, his grin stretched too wide, teeth bared, his lips parted, and a tongue slid out, not pink, not human, black, long, ropey. It uncoiled, lashing against the glass like it was tasting the barrier. My stomach dropped into ice. The monitor Brett shook his head harder, eyes wild, mouthing something urgent I still couldn't hear. At the door, the thing wearing Brett's face tapped once more, tongue writhing, smile carved too wide. "Come on," it said, voice perfectly calm. "Let me in." The monitors weren't supposed to work. Red had said they were shot, fried, nothing but paperweights with glass faces. But after what I saw at the door, after that black tongue unfurled like something from a nightmare, I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that this wasn't just me cracking under fluorescent hum and too much coffee. So I crouched at the table, pulled the power strip from the dust, and slammed the plug into the wall. Sparks bit, and a thin electrical whine filled the booth. One by one, screens blinked awake. Static, grain, then images, not clear, not crisp, more like smudged eyes on a dirty window. Angled shots of the lot, the fence, the barrels, the broken warehouse ribs. The light outside struggled to reach the lenses, leaving patches of dark like ink spills. I leaned close, heart trying to crawl out of my throat. Something streaked across the first camera. Fast, huge, just a smear of motion blotting the image for half a second. Then the second screen flickered and the same smear shot past like the shadow of a bird, only 10 times too large. Then the third and the fourth. What the hell is that? The booth's air felt tighter. I turned in my chair, half expecting to see the thing inside with me. Nothing, just the cot, the fridge, the bathroom door. I grabbed the landline, knuckles slick. The dial tone buzzed. Relief. I punched the number Red had scribbled on the desk. Ring. Another, then a click. Yeah. A man's voice, young, rough around the edges. Hi, this is Ethan, new hire. I'm at the Ridgewater site. Something's moving out there. I need. Wrong number, man. My stomach sank. This is Site Solutions, right? I'm calling the supervisor's line. He laughed, a thin, tired sound. Supervisor, I don't work for anybody, and Brett's dead if that's who you're looking for. I froze. What? Brett, he said again, like the name tasted bitter. The guy who used to take calls on this line. He's gone, months now. Static hummed between us. I forced words out. Then who am I talking to? Just a guy, he said, who answers when it rings. I pulled the receiver away, staring at it like it might bite. Then I hung up hard, the plastic crack loud in the booth. My pulse still drummed when my eyes drifted back to the monitors. That's when I noticed the feet. One screen showed the bare patch of ground I'd seen earlier, roped with caution tape, hazard cones leaning tired. And there, just at the edge of light, were a pair of feet, small, bare, toes sticking out of cheap plastic sandals. They didn't move. The rest of the body was swallowed in shadow, but those feet stood perfectly still, planted like the figure was waiting for me to notice. My skin crawled. Jesus Christ, I whispered. I stared, waiting for breath, for a twitch, for anything that proved life. But the stillness was absolute, too absolute. Then, that blur. The same dark smear from before swept across the frame, fast as a whip crack. The feed sputtered, blinked, cleared. The feet were gone. The patch of earth stood empty, cones trembling slightly, tape fluttering in a wind I couldn't hear. And the silence in the booth pressed harder than ever, as though something outside had just moved closer. The cameras seemed to decide for me which one I'd stare at. Out of all the broken lenses and dim gray shots, one frame sharpened until it looked almost deliberate. The dirt patch, that bare, taped-off square of ground, cones leaning, the earth packed hard like someone had tamped it down with anger. Floodlight glare cut across it, turning the soil pale, unnatural. I leaned closer to the glass, breath fogging the screen. The tape twitched with the night air, threads glimmering. It looked less like a worksite hazard and more like a stage. And like every stage, it waited for someone to enter. My mind snagged on an old memory from university, one of the only classes where I hadn't been half asleep. Shakespeare Hamlet, the gravedigger scene. I could still hear my professor's voice, raspy, full of glee at quoting lines older than the continent we stood on. What is he that builds stronger than either the mason, the shipwright, or the carpenter? Horatio answered, the gallows maker, for that frame outlives 1,000 tenants. But the gravedigger corrected him. Nay, the grave, the houses he makes last till doomsday. I had thought it funny at the time. Now, staring at that taped-off patch, it didn't feel like a joke. Gravediggers build stronger. Always, a movement tugged at the corner of the frame. So subtle at first I thought it was static. But then the soil itself flexed, like something beneath it shifted. I straightened, pulse thudding. The dirt mound bulged upward, cones rattling as the ground cracked down the center. A fissure opened, wide enough for something to push through. And then it did. A hand. No, not a hand, not exactly. Long fingers, but the skin looked wrong, too dark, too slick. It clawed upward, dragging the rest with it. The figure crawled out, not like a man climbing, too smooth, too fast, the way bugs pour from an overturned stone. 1 second the mound bulged. The next, it was standing there, a silhouette. Humanoid but thinner than it should be, limbs jointed too sharply. The head tilted as if curious about the camera, though no features caught the light. Just blackness. I staggered back from the monitor, chair legs scraping. The figure leaned closer to the taped edge of the pit, then turned, snapping its head toward the lens with insect speed. And the screen cut to black. My eyes whipped to the other monitors. There, on the stoop cam, the booth door in grainy gray, floodlight haloing the step, and the figure, standing on the concrete stoop exactly where Red had told me not to leave, exactly where I'd seen the faceless blur in my headlights. This time it didn't just stand. It leaned forward close enough that the lens distorted its shape. Its head pressed almost against the camera. And then, knock. Knuckles against the door I could feel through my feet. Another knock, louder, then a pause and a voice. Low, flat, too calm. Ethan. It said. My blood froze. Ethan, let me in. The voice outside knew my name. I pressed my back to the door, every nerve lit up, every muscle begging me to run even though there was nowhere to run to. The booth was a cage and I was the animal inside. Ethan. The thing said again. Knock, knock, knock. I kept my eyes on the monitors. The stoop cam showed it leaning close, head cocked like it was listening through the steel. The sound shouldn't have carried through, not that clearly, but the booth vibrated with each syllable. Then the voice changed. Open the door, Han. Jordan, my wife's voice. The exact tired warmth she used when calling me to bed after a long day. My throat closed. No, no, you're not her. Knock, knock, then Daddy. High-pitched, sweet Addie's voice. My knees almost buckled. I could see her in my mind, hair a mess from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daddy, it's cold out here. Please let me in. I slapped my palms over my ears, hard. The voice seeped through anyway, soft as a lullaby. You forgot your bag, Ethan. It's still in the car. Come get it, just 1 step. I stumbled to the table, eyes burning, monitors flickering static as if the booth itself was straining under the sound. I whispered over and over, not real, not real, not real. The stoop cam glitched. The static resolved, frame by frame, until it wasn't the figure outside anymore. It was me, my own face staring back, hair flattened from the jacket hood, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. The other me stood outside the booth door, mouthing words silently. I leaned closer to the screen, terrified and transfixed. The lips shaped the sentence slowly, like a parent exaggerating for a child. I know you're in there. My stomach dropped. The real door rattled, hard this time, like it was trying the knob. No, I whispered, you can't. Every monitor lit with fragments of that same face. Mine. On the barrels, on the dirt mound, in the skeletal warehouse frame. All of them mouthing the same line, I know you're in there. The landline shrilled. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned. The receiver pulsed red with each ring. Caller ID scrolled across the tiny screen. Home. The phone kept ringing. Each shrill note burrowed into the booth, too sharp, too real. The monitors flickered with my own face on every feed, each copy mouthing, "I know you're in there." I couldn't take it. I snatched the receiver off the cradle. "Hello," my voice cracked, more plea than greeting. For seconds, silence. Then a small breath, a child's breath. "Daddy." My heart stuttered. It was Addie, my youngest. No mistaking that sleepy lilt, the way she stretched my name into 2 syllables when she was sick or scared. "Addie." My throat burned. "Sweetheart, how are you calling me?" "I don't feel good," she whispered. The words fuzzed with static like she was speaking through wool. "I have a fever, can you come home?" The fever. My knees went weak. That very morning she'd woken up flushed, shivering under her blanket, her rabbit toy tucked under her chin. Jordan had told me to keep her home from school. Addie had smiled faintly, too tired to argue, and whispered, "Thanks, Daddy." And now that same voice begged me through the landline. "Baby, you are home," I said, panic clawing. "You're in bed." I tucked you in myself. "You're not." I stopped because finishing the thought would mean admitting what was outside. On the stoop cam, the feed jumped. The faceless figure was gone. In its place stood something smaller, child-sized, a shadow with a stuffed toy dangling from one hand. The toy's head lolled, ear torn, just like Addie's rabbit. "Daddy, please," the voice said in my ear. "It's so cold out here, let me in." My breath came in gasps. I pressed my palm over the phone as if I could stop the sound seeping into me. "You're not her," I muttered. "You can't be her." On the monitor, the child shadow tilted its head, then lifted its free hand to the camera lens. Small fingers tapped against the glass in perfect rhythm with the knock at the door. Tap, tap, tap. I dropped the receiver. It swung on its cord, clacking against the table, but the voice didn't stop. It hissed up from the floor, from the walls, from inside my skull. "Daddy." I staggered back, covering my ears again, but the words tunneled through. And then, soft as a secret, the little voice whispered, "Daddy, you already left the booth once. Don't you remember?" The air in the booth had gone stale, too thick, like breathing through cloth. Sweat crawled along my spine. I needed air, just one crack of the door. Red's warning rattled in my skull, "Don't leave the booth, even if they beg." But this wasn't leaving, just opening, just breathing. I slid the bolt back slow, heart hammering at each scrape of metal. The door creaked an inch. Cool night air licked my face. Relief spilled out of me, then froze. Silence. Not the hush of midnight. Not even the muffled quiet of my insulated cage. No, this was absence. The kind of quiet that eats everything. No wind in the trees. No insect chorus. No hum of halogen lamps. Even my own exhale felt stolen, swallowed before it left my mouth. I pushed the door wider, desperate for proof I hadn't gone deaf. Gravel stretched before me, silver under the light. I stepped forward just to the edge of the stoop and pressed my boot down hard. No crunch. The world stayed mute. My pulse raced. I stomped again, harder. Nothing. I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat anymore. A panic rose sharp in my chest. I needed some sound, something, anything. I fumbled in my pocket, fingers closing around my car keys. I drew them out, the ring clinking in my palm, except it didn't. No jingle. I hurled them out across the lot. Watched them flash in the light, arc through the air, clatter against stone. Silence. They lay there on the gravel like dead things. I swore, at least I think I did. My mouth moved, throat strained, but no sound came. The world had stolen my voice too. I staggered back inside, slammed the bolt home, chest heaving in noiseless gasps. The booth's lights glared, but even the buzz of electricity was gone. And then, thud, I spun. The bathroom door rattled once, twice. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was back inside. Something pounded from behind that locked door, something that wanted out. The pounding from the bathroom door shook the booth in its frame. Thud, thud, thud. Every instinct screamed at me to leave it shut, but if something was inside, if it had been inside all along, then the booth wasn't safe anyway. I grabbed the dead flashlight from the desk, hefted it like a club, and yanked the bolt free. The door banged inward. Nothing. Just a cramped bathroom, toilet, sink, yellowing tile, and a mirror above the sink, clouded with streaks like someone had wiped it half-heartedly with an oily rag. I raised the flashlight high, breath caught. Hello. The mirror gave me back my own reflection, pale and wild-eyed, but then it smiled. My reflection grinned, lips peeling back too wide, teeth sharp in fluorescent glare. My own mouth stayed shut. A second later, the grin flickered across my face like the image had lagged and forced itself onto me. I staggered back. My reflection didn't stagger. It kept standing, calm, smiling. Then it raised a hand, slow, deliberate. My own hand stayed frozen at my side. Its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer in horrified fascination, watching my own face mouth something again. This time I understood. We need another Fred. My stomach dropped. The uniform, the stitched patch. Red's insistence that he wasn't Fred. How many Freds had there been? The reflection's grin widened until the corners split red. My own lips stayed pressed shut. Then, without warning, it slammed its fist against the glass. The mirror spiderwebbed. Shards rained down into the sink, but no sound, not the crack of shattering glass, not the patter of fragments. Only silence pressing into my ears, thicker, heavier, until the absence itself made them ring. I stumbled back, clutching my head. My reflection kept grinning from every broken shard. A dozen versions of me staring out of the sink, whispering words I couldn't hear but somehow knew. Another Fred. Another Fred. Another Fred. The bathroom light flickered, and all the reflections grinned in unison. I couldn't stand the bathroom a second longer. The mirror shards glimmered with 100 tiny smiles, each one lagging just a breath behind my movements. I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt, though I knew it wouldn't hold back a reflection if it wanted out. The booth felt smaller now, lights too bright, air too thin. I paced in tight circles, forcing myself to focus on anything normal. That's when I saw it. A thick, dust-caked binder shoved between the fridge and the wall. A logbook. I pulled it free, coughing at the stale paper smell. The cover was cracked leather, water-stained, the Site Solutions logo stamped in a faded gray. A ballpoint pen dangled from its spine on frayed twine. I opened it. Pages filled with names, dozens of them, each line scrawled in tired handwriting. Log of night security, Ridgewater Foundry. Column after column, date, start time, end time, notes. But the strangest part, every single one was signed out by Fred. The first name might say Jonathan Keller, but the end signature, Fred. Then Mark Silva, signed Fred. Alan Wu, signed Fred. Pages and pages of this. Guards with different names, different handwriting, all swallowed at the end by the same word, Fred. My chest tightened. Red's voice echoed in memory, not Fred, not anymore. I turned further. The notes column caught my eye. Most of them were identical. Didn't leave the booth. Didn't leave the booth. Didn't leave the booth. Over and over like a mantra, until one entry. The date blurred under water damage, but the note was still legible. Stepped outside. The line had been scratched through so violently the paper tore. I leaned closer. The name on that entry wasn't Keller or Silva or Wu. It was Ethan James. My breath hitched. My own middle name, written years ago, maybe decades, but my handwriting. I staggered back, shaking my head. No, no, that's not possible. The pen hanging from the twine twitched. I froze. Slowly, as if guided by a hand I couldn't see, it lifted. Scrawled across the open page, ink bleeding fresh and wet. Ethan stepped outside. The letters etched themselves as I watched, each stroke deliberate, pressing deep enough to tear the paper. The pen dropped. I stared at the words, my own name branded there like a verdict. And for the first time all night, the booth didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a grave. The landline had gone dead silent after writing my name. I stared at the ink until my eyes burned, afraid to look away, afraid it might change again if I blinked. Then knocking, not frantic like before, sloppy, off rhythm. Yo, open up. The voice was young, slurry, barely standing upright. I crept to the door window. A man leaned against the stoop, hood up, high-vis vest crooked, a cigarette clinging to his lip like it had forgotten to fall. His eyes were half shut, his grin sloppy. "Name's Brett," he slurred. "I'm your relief man. Boss sent me down. Come on, door's heavy, help me out here." My mouth went dry. The name. The exact name the not voice had used earlier. I whipped to the monitors. One feed showed him at the door, swaying, blinking against the floodlight. But another monitor, another Brett stood inside the booth. Behind me. I spun. Empty air. Nothing but the cot, the recliner, the dead monitor's glow. Yet on the screen, Brett was right there, a few feet behind my chair, shoulders hunched, hands dangling like broken puppets. I turned back to the stoop cam. Door Brett waved lazily, exhaling smoke. "Don't be a dick, man, just let me in." On the interior feed, booth Brett moved differently, slow, deliberate. His head snapped toward the camera like a predator scenting blood, and then his mouth opened. Wider, wider, skin splitting at the corners. A black tongue slid out, thick and wet, coiling like it had its own mind. "Ethan," it said. My name shivered through the booth like a cold draft. Then again louder in perfect mimicry of my wife's voice. "Ethan," and once more high and sweet in Addie's voice. "Ethan," triplicate, my name in 3 tones layered like a choir that should not exist. My chest seized. I stumbled back, knocking the chair over, eyes darting between the monitors. Door Brett grinned, lazy and human. Booth Brett grinned wider, tongue lashing, eyes black pits. Then, darkness. Every light in the booth snapped off. The monitors died. The halogen glow outside guttered. The world went black, absolute and suffocating. And in that dark, close and echoing, I heard it. 2 voices, 2 Bretts, laughing. The dark stretched on too long. Long enough for my mind to splinter into a dozen questions, none with answers. Then click. The lights snapped back one by one. The fluorescence buzzed overhead, jittering as if nothing had happened. The monitors flickered, blank again. The booth looked the same, but I knew better now. It had shifted. Something had been in here with me during the blackout. I could still feel the damp heat of breath on my neck, even though the air sat stale and cold. I righted the chair with shaking hands, then crouched, searching for anything I hadn't noticed before. That's when I saw it, a strip of gray duct tape peeling under the cot. I tugged. A plastic sleeve came free, the kind used for binders or clipboards, edges stiff with dust. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I pulled it out, flattened it on my knee. Emergency protocol was typed across the top in faded, blocky font. Below, in red marker, someone had underlined a single sentence. "If IT enters, leave the booth." My stomach dropped. Everything I'd been told, everything red drilled into me was the opposite. Never leave the booth, even if they beg. And yet here, taped under the cot like a secret, was the reversal. If it enters, leave. Which rule was true? Which rule was the trap? I read it again, lips moving soundlessly. If it enters, leave the booth. Scratch, my head jerked up. Scratch, scratch. The sound crawled along the wall, low and deliberate, like claws raking through concrete. No, I whispered. No, no, no. The scratching grew louder, circling the booth, tunneling through drywall. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The fridge rattled as something burrowed behind it. I pressed against the desk, clutching the useless flashlight. The walls weren't barriers anymore, they were paper, thin, waiting to tear. The sound stopped. Silence. Then, a hand punched through the drywall beside me. Not a human hand. Fingers too long, skin gray and rubbery, nails black and curved. It seized my shoulder in a grip colder than metal. And this time, I didn't have the option to stay still. The grip on my shoulder tightened until I swore the bones would crack. Cold, rubbery fingers dug into me like claws trying to claim. Adrenaline surged. I swung the dead flashlight with both hands, smashing against the wall. The hand jerked, withdrew with a wet, tearing sound, leaving behind a ragged hole in the drywall. I staggered back, gasping. Dust billowed out, chalky and bitter. The hole yawned wider than it should have, too wide for one hand. I dropped the flashlight, grabbed the edges and tore, ripping the wall open until plaster and insulation gave way. Behind it was no wiring, no studs, just dirt. A narrow tunnel carved straight down like a throat. Air rushed up from it, stale and damp, carrying the smell of rot and old iron. But beneath the stink came something worse, a whisper, soft, familiar. "Ethan," my wife's voice. "Jordan." I froze, throat clamped tight. "Ethan, it's okay," she said from the dark. The sound rose with the breath of the tunnel, like her face was inches from mine, even though the hole plunged into black earth. "Come home. Just crawl, please." I staggered back, but the booth betrayed me. The monitors flickered. One by one they lit, not with feeds of the lot, but of the tunnel. Angled shots, impossible shots, as though cameras were hidden every few feet down that dirt throat. The glow painted the inside of the booth in sickly gray. On screen, the tunnel stretched deep, or damp, roots curling along the sides like veins. And then movement, shadows sliding just out of focus. My pulse hammered. There had never been cameras in the walls, I knew that, and yet the monitors stared down into this new hole as if they'd always been watching. I couldn't tear my eyes away. And then the impossible happened. On the bottom-most feed, something crawled into view. A man, clothes smeared with dirt, jacket torn, face pale under fluorescent wash. It was me. I watched myself pull forward on hands and knees, mouth slack, eyes empty. My chest rose and fell with soundless breath. On the screen, Tunnel Me lifted its head, looked straight into the lens, straight at me, and began to crawl upward. The tunnel on the monitor glowed like a throat lit from within. Dirt rained down in bursts, roots twitching as if they were veins feeding something alive. And then he emerged, the other me. I stumbled backward as my double crawled out of the jagged hole in the wall, brushing plaster dust from his jacket, standing tall like he had every right to be here. His face was mine, but slack, exhausted, as if the climb had taken years instead of seconds. He didn't lunge, didn't attack. He walked across the booth and lowered himself into the recliner like it had been waiting for him all along. The chair groaned under his weight, then settled. My throat locked. What the hell are you?" The other Ethan ignored me, reached over the armrest, found the lever, and leaned back with a sigh that sounded like it came from my own lungs. He looked at the ceiling, calm, at peace. I turned in a panic to the logbook. It still lay open on the desk, the pen twitching. Fresh ink scratched itself across the page as if an unseen hand controlled it. Ethan 1 on shift. Ethan 2 on shift. My stomach pitched. I flipped pages, desperate, but the ink wouldn't stop. It crawled down the paper, filling every line with our names, numbered and neat like the company had just doubled its payroll. "This isn't possible," I whispered. The other Ethan laughed softly, finally looking at me. His eyes were sunken but steady. "You think survival is about following their rule, staying in the box, keeping quiet." He leaned forward. "That's not survival, that's prison." I shook my head hard. "Red said." "Red's another Fred," he snapped, voice too sharp, too close to mine. "We've all been Fred over and over. One rule to keep us docile, one rule to keep us trapped. You want to see your family again." He jabbed a finger at the tunnel. "Then crawl." My chest ached with confusion. "No. If it enters, you leave. That's what the manual said. That's what this said." I shoved the logbook toward him. He smirked. "The book lies, just like the voices, just like the company." Something in me cracked. My hand slammed the desk. "Then what the hell are you?" He rose from the recliner, slow, deliberate. We stood inches apart, mirror images snarling. "I'm you," he whispered. "The part that knows the booth is a coffin." The landline rang. We both froze, staring at the shrill red light flashing on the cradle. I snatched it up, but he grabbed my wrist, and together we pressed the receiver to our ears. The line clicked. A voice, low and final, filled the booth. "Only one of you goes home." The landline went dead in my hand, a flat hum bleeding into silence. My double let go of my wrist and stared at the monitors, lips curling into a smile I didn't trust. The screens had changed. No more static, no more tunnel, every feed locked onto the lot outside. And in each frame the mounds of dirt, those taped-off hazard patches I'd thought were just demolition scars, were moving. At first it was subtle. A shiver in the cones, the flutter of caution tape with no wind. Then the soil itself bulged. Cracks split wide, spilling gravel and dust. One mound, then another, then a dozen. The earth split like eggshells and shapes began to crawl free. Figures, not whole people, attempts at people. Uniform jackets half-grown into skin, sight solutions, patches crusted with mud. Faces half-formed, jaws slack, eyes milky like the clay hadn't decided what color to be. Some crawled on all fours. Others stumbled upright, legs trembling, bodies jerking like puppets whose strings had been yanked too hard. Every one of them wore the jacket. Every one of them bore the same stitched name, Fred. I staggered back from the monitors while rising. "No, no, this isn't." The other Ethan laughed, low, satisfied. "Gravedigger builds stronger, remember. They've been waiting." On the screens, the tide of half-guards lurched in unison, shambling toward the booth. Their movements were clumsy but relentless, dozens of them spilling across the ruined lot like a flood of broken reflections. The halogen poles flickered, straining to light the swarm. The shadows stretched long, twitching, as if the darkness itself crawled with them. I slammed the logbook shut, heart jackhammering. "We have to lock it down, barricade the door, something." The other me turned slowly, eyes calm, mouth stretching into that too-wide grin I'd seen in the mirror shards. "No, Ethan." He walked to the door, hand resting on the heavy bolt. His voice was steady, almost tender. "Shifts over." And before I could stop him, before I could shout or beg, he slid the bolt back with one smooth motion. The booth door creaked open. Cold night air swept in, and with it the sound of dozens of voices whispering the same name. "Fred, Fred, Fred." My double looked back at me one last time, grin splitting wider. "Shifts over." And he opened the door to them. The booth was all screams and whispers, all dirt and dust, and the press of too many bodies trying to pour through one narrow doorway. My double's voice drowned in the chorus of Fred, Fred, Fred until I couldn't tell where mine ended and his began. Then light. A sudden blaze of gold pushed through the slit window in the door. Dawn. The flood of half-formed guards froze. The shadows stuttered. One by one, the figures crumbled back into the dirt, collapsing like marionettes whose strings had been cut. By the time the sun's rim cleared the horizon, only scattered cones and torn tape marked where the mounds had been. The booth fell silent. The other Ethan was gone. I sat slumped in the chair, shaking, waiting for something else to happen. It did. A car door slammed outside. Footsteps, the creak of the stoop. Then a knock, not frantic, not mocking. Just a tired human knock. I forced myself up and unbolted the door. A man stood there. Stooped, yellow-gray hair clinging to his scalp, eyes glazed with the weight of too many nights like mine. Fred, the real Fred. He didn't smile, didn't ask how the shift went, just held out his hand. Jacket. I peeled it off with trembling fingers. The embroidered patch felt heavier than it should, as if it had grown roots into my chest. I shoved it into his waiting arms. "You're done," Fred said, "for now." He turned away, already pulling the jacket over his shoulders. I didn't wait for more. I fled to my van, drove home on autopilot, gravel rattling beneath the tires like bones. When I slipped into bed, Jordan stirred. Her arm looped over my chest, warm, grounding. "What's wrong?" she murmured, half asleep. I pressed my face into her hair, the smell of sawdust and shampoo flooding me with a relief so sharp it hurt. And I whispered the only lie I had left. "Nothing. The final shot isn't mine to see. It's the cameras humming back to life, their lenses cutting across the lot as morning swallows the shadows." Inside the booth, two men sit side by side in the stale fluorescent light. Both are Ethan. One stares at the desk, hollow-eyed. The other turns, looks straight into the camera and smiles. A voice overlays the static, steady and certain. "Your shift starts tonight."